I was on a meeting before this with a guy that I'm helping set up his podcast, and he was uploading a file. So I said, listen, give me 10 minutes. I'm going to go and finish doing something, and I'll be right back. And then I'll help you set up the rest of the podcast. And he said, I'm only going to let you do that if you tell the next guy, the guest on your podcast, what you did. So I'm letting him and you know that I was cleaning toilets. I was scrubbing the toilets, and they are sanitary and good to go. And God, you know, damn these kids for making them so dirty.
It's important work.
It is. Do you have the pleasure of doing that in your own home, or do you employ someone to do it?
It's more about like my kids, they're in their 20s, they still live at home. It's more about they just kind of like they break the toilet. It's like fucking so easy to fix, but they refuse to do it, so I do it. Yeah.
Like the plunger part or something?
Everything, every part of the toilet. I don't know what it is with kids, but they're toilet destroyers.
How many do you have? Good for you. I have 2 of my own, and my partner has 2, and together the house is full of children, but, I would love to start there maybe. Like, you do so much. You're a writer, you're in film, you're obviously a well-known musician, you have a magazine, almost a decade into that. Like, how do you balance fatherhood with all the stuff that you've going on?
Well, just to clarify, we're a newspaper, not a magazine, but that's okay.
Apologies. You're right.
No, all good. We've done 2 magazines over the course of publishing the newspaper, just for fun to sort of see what that would look like. But I don't know, like obviously I have a strong, formidable partner that I've been with for 45 years or so, and like when we had kids, like living an artist's life, it's kind of like the kind of the challenging thing about that is sometimes you'll be drawn away for extended periods, to go and shoot a documentary, go on tour, travel to write a book, all that stuff that I did. But at the same time, when I'm not doing that, I'm kind of around, right? So, so there was a lot of kind of, in terms of parenting, uh, a lot of, I was always kind of on hand and around to kind of just to to um to do things with them, to spend time with them, and yeah, there were like months on end when I would be away, but those I think were the exception rather than the rule. Usually, especially when I was writing a book, I mean, I was around for long stretches of time. So it's like any kind of parenting. You're so intimidated and daunted by the prospects, but you rely on your own sort of intuition and wits, I think, to get through, and that's what we did.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the same as writing a book for the first time or writing an album. It's daunting going into the process, but once you take those initial steps, you realize, like, okay, I know what I'm doing, and if I just keep going, I'll have a product eventually. Um, a lot of my guests are music first and then other stuff later. It sounds like you were writing first. You were published at age 11, which is mind blowing. I don't think I knew how to put sentences together properly. How did you discover your passion and talent for writing at such a young age?
I think it was always kind of there. My parents, especially my mom, was encouraging. Like when I had that poem published in the Young Sun when I was 11, that was her idea to send it in. Um, yeah, it was just something that just kind of came naturally to me. I love books, obviously, from a very, very young age. Like books are one of the few things, like books and toys, I guess, or the among the first few things that you own when you're a kid, like things that are yours. And certainly books, the world of imagination, and being drawn to them, and then having really wonderful teachers along the way that kind of identified that, going back to probably primary school, where they just kind of were able to kind of help just push that along inch by inch. And then it had always been obviously when I kind of fell hard for music in the mid to late 70s, it was my dream to make records for sure, but it was an earlier dream to make a book. And I remember, like even in in class in middle school, when you'd have like even projects in history. Like I remember I made a book for one of those projects and got a really great mark on it. And just, that was like kind of like trial for me, like a practice at making a book, and then and at that time, even past that, through the late 70s, a lot of fanzines and kind of DIY magazines. um I wrote for a high school newspaper for many years called the Sunshine News. Terrible name, but it was a great paper. It was a high school paper distributed nationally across Canada. So every high school in Canada had copies of this paper, and the editors there, like still a few that I'm in contact with, and I would have been, just a young teen. They would send me records to review. They would send me to shows to write about them. I mean, that was an incredible training ground, right? To be able to work with an editor when you're 14, 15, 16 years old and learn about how it all happened. So when it came time for me to actually like be published, I was obviously like the thrill and anticipation was just as strong as ever. But I'd read my work in print before, and that really helped just kind of get me used to it, I think.
Yeah. I'm happy you mentioned the high school stuff. You also worked for Shades afterwards, and we said earlier that like the music industry in Canada, especially, is so vast, but also so small. I feel like there's all these people that I know, but I don't know their backgrounds, and then there's people with massive backgrounds that I've never heard of before. Um, I didn't even know Shades was a thing, and then I start to look into it, and you've interviewed like all these massive bands, REM, B-52s, Ramones. How old are you when that's happening? Are you still in high school? Are you out of high school? And was that kind of a precipice to where you went musically then?
Yeah, I would have been, yeah, like 17, 16, 17. Uh, maybe even a bit younger in the beginning. But that was Sheila Wawanash. She was the editor of Shades. It was a large form tabloid, like a punk and new wave newspaper, basically monthly, that was in Toronto. And that world, like that punk new wave world, it wasn't at all ageist. There was lots of opportunity to be young and to be published. And they had veteran writers there too. Angie Baltazare was one of them, who became a good friend of mine. And yeah, and so there were open doors in that scene everywhere, and the same is true for music as well. Like there was lots of multi-band bills. You could have recorded a demo cassette and got booked as part of those shows. It was because it was relatively new scene and relatively kind of new sound. There weren't the kind of old prejudices that existed in music in the country, and a lot of independent record labels. Certainly, a lot of independent labels that put out cassettes, which we did in the beginning and stuff. So yeah, so you're lucky as an artist too. Like a lot of it, you have to be lucky, you know, um, uh, 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 coming up and starting to make your art and make your music in a time that's bountiful and supportive, right? Um, if we started years earlier, it would have been way harder for us for sure. But the writing definitely, like on an independent label, and also, by writing about music, I was able to learn who the promoters were, what the clubs were, where the independent labels were, that sort of thing. And even meeting people like Joey Ramone, especially in the beginning, he was so supportive. I think it's important. It goes a long way when you meet your heroes and they end up being fantastic human beings. And
Yeah.
that really, like, he was so good to us that we knew that, if we were ever to get, be in a position, to influence kids, younger bands, whatever, then we would be like him. We would be approachable. And that was really eye-opening and important.
Yeah, I couldn't see that. I mean, it's you hear these stories about never meet your stars, never no, sorry, never meet your stars, never meet your heroes, right? Because it could ruin your appreciation for what they've done for you. But it's so important, I think, as we go through life to be aware of who we are, especially when we have a platform. And how are we going to inspire? How are we going to shape those people that are looking up to us? So It sounds like music was already there before you started to do that stuff. What was your aha moment with music? You know, did you pick up one of your parents' collection, the piece in the collection? What was the genre? How did you get into music?
No, I think it was, you know, like the parents kind of put you into guitar lessons and then, you know, that sort of went poorly. But again, like, you know, I was coming up at a time when you could just throw together a band overnight. You didn't have to be particularly good at your instrument. Like it was just the spirit of making something. And that was high school in Etobicoke. You know, that was you know, punk and new wave was mostly a downtown thing. Although, you know, just mentioning like heroes, you know, like that kid who was, you know, 2 grades older than me who, you know, like wore like a leather jacket and a Sex Pistols shirt, you know, to school. And, you know, who were into, they were brave enough to show, you know, the rest of the high school that they were into different music, right? And so a lot of those, you know, pace setters were important just to sort of give us a kind of agency, a license to kind of do whatever we wanted to do. And you know, I met Tim Vesley, is like one of my oldest friends, and we've been in a band together for almost 50 years. And you know, and Dave Clark came soon after. We still play with. Um, we were all kind of that mindset, and we all kind of recognized that kind of spirit of others that were doing cool stuff. And I may even remember like after our like first show ever at the Edge in Toronto in 1980, you know, there was a musician that was in the headlining band, Popular Spies. He was kind of like a side man. He played flute and keyboards. And I remember like playing the show and then you know, obviously just a shivering nerve, right? It was so exciting for us. And then going up into the dressing room and he was sort of sitting on uh the inner ledge of the window with the window open having a smoke, and I said, you got any advice for like a young band? And he said, yeah, never break up. And I think he was kind of just like, just kind of, you know, irreverently throwing that line out there. But yeah, I mean, it's been 46 years since our first record and we continue to make records. So we took his advice literally. It was like, okay, he's telling us not to break up. I guess we won't ever. So it's important to get advice like that, you know, and to help people lay the foundation for the things you end up doing in your life.
Absolutely. There's so many things I want to touch on, but I just want to follow kind of the flow of our conversation. You mentioned the latest album. It's album number 13. I have a, you know, a penchant for ones and threes. I really like numerology, and 13 is near and dear to me, not just a baseball number. Um, could you have envisioned being at album 13 all these years later?
Um, I don't know. Like, no. I mean, listen, the short answer is no. Because if you just get to do one show, right? And you get to make 145 or one album or one tour, one video, whatever. Like it's thrilling, and there are so many musicians in our world, in our country, in our city, in our neighborhoods that will never make one record or never play one show. Um, so I think part of it was just kind of really appreciate, be respectful of, and embrace like those opportunities. And I mean, I don't think we ever had like like a master plan, or we're gonna, you know, people would always ask, but people still ask, like, with the newspaper, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And with the band too, it's just like, what's the plan for touring America? What's the plan for this? What's the plan for that? And really, we were just like, whatever the next song was more important to us than any of that, you know? And I think that kind of continues to be the case, right? Like, what are we doing next? Not how
Yeah.
it fits into kind of a grand framework of career, just like, yeah, what is the next song that we're going to be playing in the rehearsal space, and how is it going to be good, right? So that's always kind of been our standard.
Sounds like you're, you know, a true creator at heart. You're not too worried about the outcome necessarily, but like what you're doing in that moment. It also sounds like you're grateful, and the gratitude and the creation are what fuel you. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, this is especially true of our last record, the Great Lakes Suite, which came out in November. That was really there was no anticipation of the outcome. There was not even an anticipation of what it would sound like musically because you had, seven of us together. That unit had played a little bit before, but we'd never really, worked on a project together. We'd never really spent that much time intensely together playing. So we didn't know like how it would even be, how it would play out. And further to that, there were only a few cases, maybe a handful, maybe two or three, where there was music that had been sort of that came, that was presented by one musician, one of the members of the ensemble to the other. Otherwise, it was you just put your hands on the fretboard, your hands on the bow, your hands on the keyboard, your hands on the drums, and you just started to play. I think it was, Alex Lifeson said in the Billboard interview about the project, he said it was so different from anything he'd done in the sense that we showed up to the studio, we hugged, we plugged in, and we just started playing. And that was really liberating. Like that was beautiful and a little bit terrifying too, because we never really knew in what direction it was going to lead or really how it was going to end. And I'm so glad we got a chance to do that after all these years because it's such a different way of working.
Yeah. There's something special in there. I'm just gonna say it. I don't know what it means or if it goes anywhere, but this concept of hug and plug, that I really like that. Show up with love and then create organically from that without a plan. I want to come back to the album, but let me just quickly ask you, you personally as a creator, I mean, writer, musician, the newspaper, do you have a plan as to what you're working on, or do you just work on what you feel compelled to work on?
I think it's like, one of the kind of parts of the skill set that I've, just, I wouldn't say perfected. That was too self aggrandizing, but just kind of like having an idea and executing that idea in the moment. Like, I've never really been one to kind of sit back and wonder whether honestly it's a good idea or not. I just want to try it to sort of see if it's a good idea. Because sometimes you just don't know until you do it. And that was the case with the paper too. When I had a bunch of my friends around, in the table in the backyard on my birthday in 2016, and just sort of said like community newspapers, like there are none left. Um, should we start one? And we just kind of threw the idea around the table in the backyard, and like good friends, they were super encouraging and had a lot of great ideas. One of them wrote our theme song. Another one offered to become the crossword person. Um, Someone else, offered to do uh, uh, graphics for us, art direction. So, uh, yeah, that was just like an inspired moment, and here we are 10 years later. So, um, and Great Lakes Suite was similar as well, like an idea that came to me while I was falling asleep. And again, like I think it's important to stress that none of this could be done in a vacuum because supportive bandmates, uh, uh, a supportive group of friends and artists. Really, writing is the only kind of truly solitary thing that I do, but everything else involves groups of people. And that's where the real energy and fun, I think, is produced when you have other people and that frisson of ideas, and the ideas bouncing off a bunch of people, and in the end, it kind of it's shaped and given its identity because a lot of people have their hands on it.
Absolutely. I think it's so important in that creative process, especially when you're working something on something more grandiose, to recognize that while one person might have a vision or lead the idea, that it takes that tight team to really get the final product out. I'm a huge fan of Anthony Bourdain. I was watching a couple episodes last night in bed, and it occurred to me for the I don't know how manyth time that, man, like the thought, the vision, the eye for detail that his cameramen and the editors all had with that show, and how, like, it came together on top of his idea and his words. It wouldn't have happened without all those people working together. Uh, I gotta ask you, I've been running V13 Media for 21 years now. I started this thing in university. All I care about is helping support the underground as much as the mainstream. What motivates you to keep going in this world that is getting harder and harder for independent journalists and editors and publishers?
Um, yeah, it's funny. I think in our sort of in our digital age, um, you know, the idea of something analog, the idea of a print newspaper, community delivered newspaper, I think in a way kind of grows in strength. The quicker people move to the other thing. Um, so when the newspaper industry contracts or when media contracts, we often see that our subscriptions spike because people want something to kind of hold on to. And now the problem with that, of course, is that the more it sort of shifts to another medium or another platform or whatever, the smaller the lane is in terms of what kind of the old media populates. So, but yeah, I think we're also, it should be stressed as well, even though we are this beautiful print newspaper that people read. We do exist in the modern world. We have a very robust digital identity. Um, Especially on Instagram and Twitter and Blue Sky. So that's important. We don't want to be an old jalopy, right? We want to kind of exist in the modern world. But again, like I think it's like goes back to that. You have a good idea, you can feel it in your bones, right? It just kind of sits with you and it excites you the day after you think of it. I think we owe it to ourselves to at least sort of play that idea out and see where it's going to go. We're kind of at that stage a little bit with our live show for this album. We played 2 nights in Toronto, and the whole show was supported by a beautiful screen that showed cinematics created by Nick DePonsage and Beshwal of the Great Lakes. And there were these very powerful moments where we were playing, and this great image of like just waves roaring onto the shore, and we were playing, and we have to sort of figure out how that's going to work as we kind of move forward in terms of, because not every venue we play is going to have a beautiful screen behind us that we're going to be able to project these images. So but that's really kind of that's challenging, but it's also, again, like we're grateful to have those challenges, right? That we can start thinking about just practical nature of the work as opposed to the dreaming of the work. That's once you've dreamt of the work, then that's 75% of it, man. Having a good idea is 75% of it.
Absolutely. You said something there that I hadn't thought of before, and that the newspaper is almost like the literary equivalent of vinyl, right? There's this nostalgia, and vinyl's come back hard over the last decade.
Hmm.
Um, do you find that your readership is older, or do you have a mix of young and old? What do you think?
Yeah, I do think, it would be slightly problematic if it was only people who look like me. But it's great. It's everybody. It's everybody. It's yeah, it's like 80 to 18. And I do think the readership now more than ever reflects our city in terms of, just the multicultural nature of our city, which is great. Yeah, no, it's there's young readers and old readers, and everybody kind of in between. We actually made two records that we included in the newspaper, two flexi discs. We did a Christmas flexi in one of our first years, and then we did a flexi with a U.S. Turtles and Little Junior that we included in the newspaper during when we did our music issue, which we try to do every year. We're not doing one this year, but so yeah, vinyl, flexi discs, analog, print, you know, something that you can hold. That's something that really does appeal to us and is a big part of our identity.
That's awesome. I'm impressed. I'm happy for you. I'm proud of you. it's not easy, as one publisher to another. It's a passion. I wake up every day and I feel like I have to do it, and we grow and expand. I haven't thought about doing anything physical yet, but you've definitely got me thinking in that direction now outside of newsletters and digital only.
Mhm.
Uh, let's go back to your album for a second, because when I was putting together notes, I've obviously was listening to the newest album, which is Great Lakes themed, and then I was looking through your catalog, and there's Huron, whale music, and then there was the drop off, and then I listened to the lyrics of the drop off, and I was like, was is this based off fact? Was there a near drowning, near death experience that precipitated this huge love for all things water, and then that theme crept into a lot of your creation, or is it something else?
The drop off, that's Gord Downie's story, right? On the record. So that's a
Doing the
person.
spoken word on that.
Yeah, that's right. It's a story that he tells on
Fair.
the record that we support musically. Yeah, that was an interesting for us. It was interesting. You know, um, I'd heard Gord tell that story about nearly drowning in Lake Ontario when he was a kid. I'd heard him do it live at an event, and so when it came time to put together this record, I thought it would be great to sort of include that that piece, partly because Gord was a huge advocate for clean water, and I thought it would be great to, have him be part of it. But, this is, we make that decision in his absence. He's not able to tell us whether he thinks it's a good idea or not. In the end of the day, we sought permission from the family, and they gave us the green light. And we worked really hard at it. I think, we spent nearly probably an entire afternoon playing along to this story that Kevin Hearn had loaded into his sampler. So we had the piece running over and over and over again, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure out musically how that would best kind of be accompanied. And what you hear on the record is us, in the moment, really just kind of creating music behind Gord's story. And just to kind of more directly answer your question, yeah, like water imagery for us, it all has always been kind of a thing. um, Probably since whale music, right up through, music inspired by the Group of Seven, up into the Blue Hysteria, and certainly here with the Great Lakes Suite. And water's elemental, right? Like it's something that's just sort of a huge part of our lives. And so it's hard for that kind of, that image to not be part of the songwriting, no matter
Mhm.
what capacity it's in.
But even going back to Melville, which obviously for me tied into to whale music, I think in some way. But was there like a specific water related incident that subconsciously or consciously for you said like, I want to bring this idea into my art?
No, I don't think so, Chris. I think it was, yeah, this was just, and literally, like for me, the title of the record, "The Great Lakes Suite," just kind of came to me while I was falling asleep, and it was really nothing kind of beyond that. I think we had looked for a project that was similar to our music inspired by the Group of Seven record, which is mostly instrumental, but also has some spoken word in it, and two lyrical pieces. We wanted to get back into the studio and do something that wasn't song based. And so, once I had sometimes all you need is a title, honestly. Like you name it, and then other people will kind of interpret it, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, that was the case with that, with this record, where, we just kind of threw it out, and everybody kind of interpreted it in its own way. I wouldn't say there was one particular kind of whatever incident or whatever memory or whatever. Although, now that we've been talking about the record a lot, I've been thinking a lot about my experiences on the water when I was a kid, right? And like, that Gord story of nearly drowning, everybody's had that experience, right? I mean, we live in Canada. We have to seek water in the summertime. We do. And and bad shit can happen, right? Especially
Yeah.
when you're young. And that was another thing about this record too. There were moments where we had to make sure that instrumentally the album reflected that kind of terror. And also just like the power and terror of the Great Lakes. I mean, anytime you've ever stood on the shoreline of Superior, for instance, and looked out, like it's an incredibly intimidating part of our geography. The sheer scale, right? To say nothing of all the countless shipwrecks, right? So, we wanted it to be, you know, I mean, parts of it are a bit of a love letter, I think, but also parts of it you should give you a bit of a shiver and a bit of a scare when you listen to it because it gets dark in certain places.
Absolutely. Um, I like to go into these thoughts because you never know what you can pull out from someone. I had a guest on a few weeks ago or a few days ago, Stephen Blush, a writer in the US who's best known for, hardcore and hardcore punk, but he's a Jewish guy that grew up in New York. And I said, "What's the connection? Like, how did this happen?" And we dove into a bit more, and by the end of it, we were talking about his family life and how it wasn't great, and ultimately, like, he was seeking community, he was seeking the love and support that he wasn't finding at home, which he found in that community, which precipitated his entire career. And for you, I found it so funny that you have so much water-themed, water-related music, and then on the flip side of that, you have writing about hockey, which is frozen water, and, you get this overall image around you that I would love to pick apart, especially now that I know you're a very go with the flow guy, which is obviously also water.
Um, well, yeah, like I remember like Ron McLean saying that he thought Canada was a dance floor, and I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, ice." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's kind of cool." Um, yeah, like frozen lakes and rivers and frozen sluices and natural ice. Yeah, that's I've definitely done my time um, on those surfaces, and it is. You're right. It is frozen water. So again, like I think it's just something that's really always really close to us, and we like to be part of, whether we're skating on it or swimming in it or fishing on it. Right.
Yeah, fair. Um, I find the Group of Seven work really fascinating because I only really know about that from art and from my parents having loved Group of Seven growing up, very specific art, unique to Canada. So I wouldn't mind touching on that. You mentioned the ice there, and you have on a cold road out, which you wrote after touring with the Tragically Hip. What was it like coming back full circle and then having, Gord's words on a project of yours after having been so close with them and then losing him and then cathartic, tough? Tell me about the experience.
Probably both of those things, honestly. Um, but also, like I think more than anything else, like the challenge to you know, take his art and fuse it with our art and create something new out of it. That's the challenge, right? But the beautiful thing about this record and using Gord's words were, I worked closely with him, was friend of his, and one of the last conversations I'd had with him was actually about a book that I was had somebody had come to me with the idea for a book, and I sort of said, well, I would do it, but I think it would be great if I did it with Gord. So I got him on the phone and sort of I laid this idea at his feet to see what he would say. Um, in the end, we weren't able to make it happen. But being sort of creatively close to him, um, I got a sense that he would, be one to kind of continue to kind of push to make this recording something unique that could be strong and stand on its own two legs. Kevin Hearn, was his musical director. I don't think he was officially called that, but he really helped pull together Secret Path, and beyond that. And Dave Clark, was his drummer for many years too. So we all kind of had a real kind of creative shorthand with him. So in that sense, it helped kind of guide us through the project. But yeah, if we'd fucked up, it would have been brutal, right? I mean, and not kind of honored his kind of creative legacy, right? Which was the main driving point. Just making sure we made something good out of what he gave us.
Mhm. Well, I think the new album is incredible. I was listening to it while editing some work yesterday, and it almost borders on ambient. Like I was getting kind of like hints of Boards of Canada were coming up, you know, like it fell into the background so naturally, but not in a way where you forgot about it. It just complemented the flow that I had. So kudos on a good job. I'm getting like a general idea of your mindset and your drive. You seem to be very go with the flow. You seem to be very about organic creation and just doing whatever is in you at that time. Tell me in your words about your mindset and what, motivates you when you wake up.
Yeah, it's always kind of an interesting day, honestly, because, well, I will say that, if, and this is especially true for, younger people or people who are looking to kind of, work in a creative realm, but certainly in our country, in Canada, um, I think you kind of have to have a lot of plates spinning in the air. You have to, explore a lot of different kind of arts to the one that is your main art. Uh, and that's partly out of necessity, but it's also partly out of the joy of just like variety, right? And being able to work on a film at the same time as you're recording an album, at the same time as you're writing books, at the same time as you're doing X, right? Like that's all really great stuff. But it is also a necessity. There are very few people in this country really that can do one thing and survive doing it, right? So, yeah, you have to be a little bit more complex here than perhaps in other places because of the sheer just the nature of our population and the amount of people that would be drawn to something like what we try to do. Um, but yeah, kind of I think I know like people whenever talk to fans, whether they're people who read the books or people who listen to the records or people who watch the films or subscribe to the newspaper, they're always just like they like the fact that you're never really sure what's going to come next, out of what I do and what we do. And that's a strength as opposed to a weakness, right? Like in
Mhm.
certain industries, in certain worlds, that would not be considered reliable, right? Like people would want sort of the one thing done well over and over again, but this is not it's not interesting to me that way, and being a little bit peripatetic in terms of how that kind of career and that life is kind of navigated. It's touched on a lot of really amazing bases. And I think I can speak for the others when I say that as well. Everybody I know, certainly everybody in that collective that was on that record, um, has their hands in a lot of different disciplines and does a lot of really different, interesting things.
Mhm.
And that's beautiful.
Agreed. Similar to that last question, just trying to pull at this same string a little bit more. Your kids, you said, are in their 20s, early 20s. They say, "Dad, I don't know what I want to do with my life." How do you respond?
Um, oh well, that's fine too. I mean, like yeah, I just it's important to keep just trying different things and letting the world come to you a little bit. Um, I'm also like the gift of being in your 20s, like really. I mean, like, I mean, I knew, when I was like 11, what I wanted to do. And, but that's not the case for everybody. And that's okay. It's, sometimes it takes a while. And sometimes you have to pass through a bunch of different things to get to the thing that you like. Um, I think my kids kind of know what they're doing. They do, so that's good, and that gives me a bit of comfort as a parent for sure. But I think also you kind of have to embrace that search, right? You embrace that journey to try to find a thing that satisfies you. Tom Petty said, success is being able to pay the rent by doing something you love, and Jay Baruchel said, find something that you love to do and trick somebody into paying you to do it. Like there's a lot of, those are two pieces of advice I always pass on to them. And I think that really applies to everybody, no matter where you're at in your life.
Percent. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that because same guest, Stephen Blush, he has in some ways, I guess a similar journey to you when it comes to the writing, you know, the university paper and all this fun stuff. And one of his early interviews was the oh my goodness, Black Flag. I was gonna say Black Sabbath, totally wrong genre, Black Flag. And the members that he was talking to said you have to change your definition of success, and success should be um, how you feel when you wake up. It's not
Yeah.
money or the fame. It's you know, does it inspire you? Does it motivate you? And I think that my frame of mind is similar to yours, where go out there, live, try, fail hard, fail fast, and the more you do so, the more likely you're going to find that you know, that raison d'etre that follows you or takes you to somewhere else, because not everyone finds it at 11.
Well, and how you know, like, and how you negotiate the high points is just as important as how you negotiate the low points too, right? Like
Yeah,
you have to kind of see it as a whole, you know, and there's going to be, listen, especially in art in Canada, I mean, like there's going to be peaks and valleys, right? And you know, the sooner that you can kind of learn how to, you know, live and cope with those extremes, and you know, just like navigating the boat, like through the you know the unpredictable waters, like that's a skill that you learn after a while, but it's a skill that you have to learn. It's not one that you're born with.
absolutely. Um, I spoke with Jake Gold to kind of end last year. He's a manager. He famously managed the Hip, and he brought up this concept that was new for me, which was all the gold records, no walls to hang them on. And we had a really cool conversation about accolades and, you know, his drive and his motivation, which was really just constantly going, creating what's next. You also have all kinds of accolades, the only Canadian, I believe, to have awards in film and television, music, and for your writing. How do you see the awards versus the creation?
Well, Jake has walls that he hangs his gold records on, by the
Fair.
way. Um, I'm also grateful to Jake for getting me my last two sets of Converse. Actually, I think Jake had a Converse endorsement, and he was like, "Call this person; she'll get you a Converse." And so I did, and I got him. It was great. Um, but yeah, we were with Jake when we toured with the Tragically Hip for sure. He would ride in our van occasionally and tell outrageous stories, which was great. Um, I've always had a lot of time for him
Mm.
as a friend for sure. Um, and whenever there's a tennis tournament on, he's my first text because he loves tennis so much. Um, uh, uh, yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, you can't worry about whether somebody is going to give you an award for the work. Most cases in your life, I mean, even artists that have done like 10 times the stuff that I have done in terms of volume, you know, maybe you're recognized once or twice, but you can't chase that. You can't let it define you. Um, it's really nice occasionally for sure to get that, to get, you know, like a group set of approval. Got to remember too, like I've been nominated a bunch of times for a bunch of awards in the literary world in particular. And, you know, you're dealing with a jury, and I've been on juries before too, and I know how that works. So you can't worry about whether your record or book or film was the one that everybody could agree on, because that's not necessarily, that can't really reflect the nature or quality of a work either. You know, there could be something that is so strong that it turns people off, right? So, yeah, just trying, you're right. Like when you get up in the morning, or even better, when you close your eyes at night, it's dark. It's for all of us. And you have to, you know, swim in those thoughts that are in your head. And you have to be comfortable that you made the right choice. For some people, making the right choice is not the same choice that I would make. But if it's the right choice for them, then, you know, that's significant as well.
Agreed. What would you say to aspiring writers and musicians out there? We work with so many of them, and I think one of the most common questions, most common concerns that gets raised is, you know, I just want to get signed. I need a label. I just need to be on tour. I just need this. I'm of the opinion that we shouldn't live in the if this happens, I will be okay. You have to be happy now. You've had that success. You are on the other side. You know, What is the path? What is the right answer? Is there even one?
I think it's, I mean, listen, I think they're a few pillars, like I think if you work hard, you have to work hard. I think more or less you have to be good to people. There are some out there that aren't good to people that have been successful, and that's okay. You know, um, you can be a bad person and be a great artist. That happens. But generally, I think if you're, especially when you're starting out, if you're decent to people, that really helps. You have to work hard. And, I think you just have to listen to your guts, right? Like, that will tell you with that whether or not what you're doing is worth doing. Um, yeah, for young musicians, for sure. Like, I mean, young writers as well. Like, it was Rick Emmett, I think, the guitar player from Triumph, told me one day that there are two kinds of artists, those who want to make art and those who have to make art. And be the artist that has to make art, because that's where the great art comes from. It's not, you know, making art, whether it's music, books, film, whatever, albums. It can't, for it to be really, you know, good. Maybe that's the wrong term, but for it to really truly realize your vision, man, like that takes a lot of sweat, and a lot of intensity. And Claudia Day, who's a novelist, she told me that I think her second last book, she was thinking about they were out shopping, her family was out shopping, and she'd been trying to figure out a plot point in her book. This is the book Heartbreaker, which is really great. And she was in the back seat, and she realized in that moment what the plot point was. Like she solved her creative problem. And she was so occupied by it that she opened the door of the car and stepped out, even though the car was moving, because they were going by her house and she had to get to her laptop and she had to write it down. And that's, you get like that, you, especially with writing, because it's so interior, right? You get just absolutely, you become a zealot, your own zealot, and just become completely absorbed by it, but you have to. And in a way, it kind of has to hurt a little bit. And one of the things about certainly writing, and I just sent an opening chapter of a book off to my editor just to sort of say, like, is this any good? Because the process of writing, there's massive self doubt, because that work is like completely interior. You're just creating it out of your own imagination. You can play a song in front of a bunch of people and you have a pretty good sense whether that song is like, but writing, I mean,
Yeah.
you live in that hive of your own creation for years. And I remember when my first book came out, I was thought like, well, fuck, I've written it. The publisher has it. It's going to come out. I have no idea if it's good or not. Like no idea. And one of the things that was great is that, oh, people liked it. It was like, so I felt great afterwards because I thought I just, yeah, I thought I'd failed. So you never know.
I really appreciate that sentiment, this whole conversation having led to this point. Like, even if I just pull out of this, it's desire versus compulsion. If you feel compelled to do something, I think that's true creation. That's true artistry. And artistry doesn't have to be on the traditional mediums. It could be an entrepreneur. It could be a athlete, right? Like when you wake up and you cannot see yourself doing something else, that's when you know you're in the right spot. And I really hope that people can find that and feel that. Let me ask you one last question before we wrap up here. We'll get a little bit more abstract and philosophical. West End Phoenix, you are a man who seems to constantly redefine himself. I don't want to say like, rising from the ashes over and over again, but you do seem to redefine yourself. Is the Phoenix you? And do you also, two parts, do you also see yourself expanding the Phoenix past the West End? Is this something that's going to be more grandiose?
We're a team of 9. And it was my idea to begin with, but very quickly in the beginning, it became excuse me, a team, a team of 9 people. And even beyond that, honestly, Chris, like uh, every um, every 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks, when we distribute the paper, we have almost 100 delivery volunteers that come to the office and pick up the newspapers and go out into the neighborhoods and deliver them on foot, or sometimes on their bikes. So it's really kind of, I think they feel a certain ownership to the paper too, as they should, because those papers would never get out to our readers. A group of them will come and stuff envelopes and stamp the return addresses on the envelopes and package them up and take them to the post office. And we mail about 1,000 every issue out across Canada and around the world. So all of that, so it's a huge group thing. And yeah, we've often dreamed about, maybe an East End Phoenix if we could. I think that's the natural place to go. But, a lot of my time is spent kind of convincing people to support, print, independent, nonprofit media for the paper as it exists today. I would have to, that would have to be, twofold in terms of affording, being able to pay and support another paper, a satellite paper in another part of the city. I'd love to be able to do it, but the money's hard to find for that. So all of the money that we do kind of find, and we're funded in a lot of cases. We don't have much government support. It's mostly donors and patrons, people who believe in independent media, who want to support through a donation, and that's where a lot of our money comes from. We also do events and stuff too, and that kind of helps. And of course, our subscribers, and every one of our subscribers helps pay the contributors. And that was a baseline for us from day one, because we had a couple of people on staff who had to leave media because they weren't properly compensated for their work.
Yeah.
We decided as a baseline to make sure that everybody got paid from the beginning. Even when I was writing for the National Post, like, I would call in an idea for a story and they would tell me that I could write it, but they couldn't pay me for it. And it just seemed absurd to me. You have to pay people for their work. And so we have. And so anytime I appeal to subscribers or patrons or donors or advertisers, um, or corporate partners, I appeal to them on that level. By them supporting the paper, they're allowing, writers, journalists, photographers, illustrators to have a life in the places that they live. And frankly, a lot of the neighborhoods that we gravitate towards, new neighborhoods, are there because artists are there. And so we want to keep them there. We want to allow them to continue to, have a living wage so that they're able to bring all of this amazing stuff that they do to the neighborhoods.
Humble answer, and obviously an answer filled with gratitude. Hallmarks of good leadership, Dave. I'll just say that.
Thank you.
Um, I'm grateful for your time, for you giving me an hour of your life and a bit of your psyche. At this point, I do the same thing every time, which is I just hand the mic over to you. Not that you haven't already, but impart on us a little bit of sage advice to send us off.
Advice. Well,
Could be anything, make sure your tires are inflated before you go in the snow.
I think it was Geddy Lee that said, always bring your wallet on stage. That was a big one of his. My friend Gord said, avoid the devil's well-laid plans, but don't suck up to God, which I think is really good too. So I'll just leave you with those two.